Hi and welcome. Panchalee graduated in philosophy, which gives you deep, wonderful perspectives about the world. Her career foundation in writing was honed at a long stint at the Times of India and briefly at the Asian Age. She switched gears to content writing in 2006 when it was still a nascent field. In 2010, she founded a content writing agency, Purple Iris Communications, which she continues to manage. Panchali has worked in India, Singapore, and is now based at Santa Clara in the US. She knows what it means to build a career in content writing, and her advice comes from real life experience, not copy paste wisdom. She'll be expanding on the skills content writers need to learn and develop, and how AI will not be the solution to everything. This is episode 81 of My First Job, the podcast that covers engaging career journeys. And every single one is full of twists, turns, and insights. I am Venugopal Nair, the host of this podcast and CEO of Ideascape Communications, an advertising agency into branding, creative, and design. So settle in, sit back, and enjoy the conversation. Or put on your headphones and catch up while you hit the road. And yes, please do rate and share it with people you think will benefit from this career journey. Panchali, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Venu. It's wonderful to be here. I hope the next few minutes or hour, I able to share things which somebody who wants to get into this career will benefit from. Thank you.
I'm sure they will, Panchali. But why Purple Iris Communication?
So it's been a while, so I'm trying to remember how I chanced upon that.
Okay,
One is the name, the flower purple iris stands
right.
for knowledge and wisdom.
Okay,
So I was looking for something which has a little more meaning to it, and also I like the ring of it somehow,
right.
how it sounds. So yeah, that's it. Nothing deeper than that.
No, but that is, I didn't know that it meant knowledge and at least the analogy of
Wisdom, it
purple
says.
iris. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great. So, writing is something that you were interested in right from childhood, or was it something that you developed an interest for later on?
Um, I had always loved reading more than writing. Even as a child, from your Amar Chitra Katha to Nancy Drew, and
Yeah,
then started with war novels, biographies, etc. So I loved reading, and there is a little bit of writing in my family. In fact, I had an aunt, my father's elder sister, who lived with us, a feisty woman, someone who championed women's position in society and education, etc. So I think she had always instilled that I should explore reading, and she did prompt me into writing. I wouldn't say I did a whole lot of that. She would keep telling me, keep a journal, keep a journal. Uh, but yeah, somewhere along the way, I picked it up.
and then how did this whole college and graduation and all that happen? Because obviously philosophy is not something that at 18 and 20 years old you're very interested in. You probably develop an interest in it later on in life, but anything you
Yeah,
remember from those days?
yeah, quite a lot of twists and turns, I would say. So I grew up in Assam, in a place called Jorhat,
Okay.
typical, small town India. People don't dream too big, I would say, at least back then. But so my aunt, supported by my parents, so she's like, you need to get out of here. Delhi is the place for you. She, in fact, and both my parents wanted me to get into civil service. And I was somehow not so convinced, but didn't want to break their heart and didn't really say, no, I'm not doing that. But if you looked at my old essays, what do you want to be when you grow up? they would all be civil
Civil service.
civil service.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so I went to Delhi wanting to study geography. Somewhere along the way, in my high school, I've always enjoyed languages, social sciences. Somehow I really, really enjoyed geography, and I wanted to make a career out of it. Those days, our ideas were kind of limited. Exposure, of course, was limited. I wanted to study marine geography. Now,
Okay.
when I think back, I don't know why. I hadn't seen the sea, let alone the ocean, and I don't know what my ideas were. So, in
Okay.
any case, so I went to Delhi University, Miranda House, for admission, and I just missed by zero point 0.5 marks on geography. I didn't make the cutoff. So
Okay.
the only places available for me at that time in Miranda House was philosophy. And I had, in fact, taken logic as a subject in my 12th grade. So logic was one of the papers, one of in the program, high scoring. That was a motivation.
That's
So
always a consideration. Yeah.
yes, so I joined philosophy, BA philosophy in Miranda House. First few months or maybe a year, I just floated. I didn't know where I got in and what I was doing. But yeah, we had some really good professors, and slowly my interest developed. Yeah, so from wanting to study geography, then got into philosophy, and then got into journalism. In my third year was when I really started thinking that maybe this is a career for me, and then stuck to journalism.
Okay. So then you was that your first career move? You worked in journalism straight off the bat after graduating?
Yes, no, yeah. So after Miranda House, so what happened was towards the third year, um, and I had always enjoyed current affairs. There was a, I don't know if they still publish it. It is called the Economic and Political Weekly.
Okay.
So it's a journal, and Miranda House Library used to subscribe to that, and I enjoyed reading the commentaries. There were several, columnists of that time, which I remember a few even today. Swaminathan Ankleshwara Iyer, who wrote
Right.
for 80, he was the editor, I think, of 80 for a long time. MJ Akbar, I just loved his style of writing. Judge
Right.
Suraya. So I used to read a lot of that, but never really considered that as a career. And towards the third year, I remember we were out for a movie, went into a bookstore, and I picked up this book by this gentleman called Thomas Friedman. Hadn't heard of him, and
Okay.
the book is called From Beirut to Jerusalem. uh, you know, I just was completely blown away. He was a war reporter, reporting from the conflict zone and his life. And so probably there was already a seed germinating, in my head, and this kind of sprouted. So I said, so what do I do? What are the options left? So for me, there were two options. One was in film journalism, which was really that was being offered in Jamia Millia. And the second was Indian Institute of Mass Communication, which had a 9-month program in
Okay.
English journalism. So I really prepared for it. It was an all India entrance test. I cleared it, and that's how I started.
Okay. And then your first job was at the Asian Age?
Yes, a very brief time, really, 6 months. So, of course, I had, all these big columnists in mind, and it was MJ Akbar's newspaper. He was a star for a lot of people who wanted to get into journalism, even otherwise.
Yes.
One of the youngest editors of that time. And then, of course, I had read Thomas Friedman, who was reporting from the war zone. So I jumped in, right? So I went into Asian Age, and I was put on the comics page.
Okay.
So, so I
Okay.
was a rookie, of course.
Yeah.
But I stayed on the comics page for several months. And then also, I mean, I wanted to do something
What does
which,
that mean on the comics page? Because those are normally syndicated by
yeah,
from various
of
strips are
course.
syndicated. So what is the job that you had to do?
So I was
That's
on the desk. So,
okay.
you would know, I don't know if that software is still there. It's called Quark Express.
Yeah, okay.
Before InDesign, etc. Right? So
Right.
so Asian Age in those days was quite advanced in terms of the technology.
Right.
So we were put on the task of managing pages.
Okay.
So my job was to look at, okay, this is peanuts, this number which went yesterday, so the next number is today, in the serial order.
Right.
So you then your crossword and all the others. So my job was to just design the pages. So
Okay.
they didn't
Okay.
have separate designers, if I'm not wrong.
Hmm.
The sub editors also did the design work, design as in the layout work. And if you were on the news pages, you would have someone, of course, overseeing that work, where which story goes. So yeah, so after 6 months, I wanted to move into something which really want could get me into the thick of things where news is happening. So
Okay.
that's how.
Who did you interview with at Asian Age, or was that just one of those
Yeah, so
pieces
I
which?
was recruited directly from IMC. We were eight of us. There
Okay.
was a gentleman called Shekhar, forgetting his second name now,
Okay.
Shekhar Gupta or Shekhar Kapoor. I'm forgetting his name.
Shekhar Gupta, the print.
No, 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 no,
Okay.
no, no, no. This gentleman's
Okay.
name, I'm forgetting his first name was Shekhar.
Okay.
That's all I remember. So yeah, so we
Okay.
were eight of us, and
Huh.
so yeah,
Okay. So that's how you got into journalism, and then you said 6 months later you moved to the Times of India.
yeah. I did not want to. I said, okay, so this is not the journalism I had signed up for. So it's like I'm going back, and by then I think I was also missing home. I had been away from home for long. So
Okay.
I quit. My boss at the time, very nice gentleman. So he says, "What do you want to do?" I said, sort of. I think his name was. I said, sort of. I don't see myself doing this for long, and I don't see myself doing other things, because it was a small setup, and already there were quite a few of my batchmates who were there, right? So it's like I want to get into where I can write,
Right.
and I don't want to be on the desk for a very, very long time. At the time, I didn't see the desk as adding that much value. Now I do. Now I know what the desk taught me. At the time, I wanted to write. I wanted to see my name in print. So I quit, and then so I was planning to go back home. So he says, no, 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 don't do that. It's a very wrong thing to do. Hang on. Do you know people in the industry? I said, no, I don't. So he gave me a couple of contacts. He says, why don't you go speak with people around, see if they are looking for jobs? And it just so happened that Delhi Times in those days had just been launched. It was a supplement, metro supplement.
Okay.
And I went in, and interestingly, Times of India at that time was going through a lockdown.
Oh.
So yeah, so after I got in, I had to still write as a freelancer for a good 2.5 months before they could issue the employment papers to me.
Okay. So what kind of stories did you do? You spent a fair amount of time at the Times
Yes,
of India, right?
yes, 12 years in all.
Okay.
Real grounding in journalism, I would say. And I'm now, when I look back, I see that I got a chance to do a lot of things. So we were a set of reporters come sub editors. So now I see how both these skills are so, so important. Not just how you write, how you improve copy, how you improve somebody else's copy without messing with their style. Those are things I would say I learned in those initial few years, of course, were really, really important. So I had some good mentors, good editors who I worked with. So yeah, so my very first article, in fact, you're asking me, I remember. So my editor at that time, Umesh, he called me. He says, I have this beautiful photograph of the Lotus Temple. So I want to use this picture as the on the front page of Delhi
Right.
Times. Go do a story. I said, but what do I do? Go look around. I'm sure there'll be a story there. So
Okay.
I was like, where do I start? So I asked a few friends around, who were my colleagues. They said, just make a trip there. Try and talk to people who manage that store. And you won't believe it, Venu. When I went there and I spoke, the very first time I went and spoke to that person who was managing that, you know what he said? He says, when we built the Lotus Temple, there was already a track going next to that, but either there were not that many trains going. I don't know what was the issue, or Delhi pollution levels were going up. They spent in those days lakhs of rupees every month to wash the dome.
My God. Okay.
So what an amazing story I got. I mean, I just couldn't believe. And this was because my editor loved that photograph that a photographer was passing by had taken, and he wanted to use that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the photograph which showed the temple in its pristine form, what it takes to get to that form is what you were able to,
Yes, get.
figure out when you got there. This is always the case. I think there was another episode I did with a journalist who, Lalita here, who said that the difference between reporting on the ground and just sitting and, you know, sort of making it up from desk research, there's a huge difference. And
Huge
like you
difference.
said,
Yeah.
it's a massive. So, what were some of the other stories that you did? I also want to go a little deeper into that point which you spoke about, where you said, how do you edit someone's writing without
Mhm.
messing with the style? So, if you can tell me what were some of the things that you had learned from that?
Yeah. Okay. So you asked me about the writing also, right? So
Yeah,
two things. So one is the writing, one is the editing. So if you want me to start with the writing,
yeah,
um, so I didn't get anywhere close to Thomas Friedman. That much I can tell you.
okay,
So, where Delhi in those days, even today, I suppose, is probably the best place for a reporter to start with. There
okay,
is just so much happening. You just have to keep your eyes and ears peeled, and there are a lot of stories you can do. So I for Delhi Times we did little softer stories. There were articles, but in those days, if I'm not wrong, Delhi Times was being published, I think, thrice a week or something. So it can't be just a here and now kind of story. Something that can stay alive for a few more days. So more a little more feature-ish. Um, then 1 week I would be in Metro, which is the main newspaper. So I would be editing. Plus, I was given the health beat to write. So going to Delhi hospitals, talking to. There was just a lot to do there.
yeah,
But one of the stories which I think I can tell you, which also shows probably a skill that reporters and even today as a writer, content writer, needs to develop: listening. So I was given the task to go to Tihar jail. There was the inmates were doing some cultural program, and Shabana Azmi was coming for that.
okay,
And so I was told to go and report. And it was not a story that anybody would be, very excited. They're just doing some song and dance, and I have to go and report. And I went there. And after the program, the superintendent of police called all the reporters who were there just for a chat, and he gave some numbers. And somebody asked about overcrowding, which is a big problem in Tihar jail.
yeah,
And at the time, this gentleman said something. He says, "Yes, now of course it's a bit more because it's winter." And so it's like, yeah, in winter, why? He says, "Yeah, you know how it is, right? We get a lot of homeless people here."
wow,
So I did not probe much. I went away, and the next day I saw all the reports. Nobody had mentioned that point. I told my boss, I said, apparently there is something called a winter rush in Tihar, because in winter, in Delhi winter, the brutal winter, the homeless do petty crime, and they go in for summary trials, and they get a roof over their head and a
wow.
blanket in Tihar jail.
Terrible. Yeah, and to think that a
So
prison is the safe place from the
yeah,
elements. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Obviously, there's a lot to. Okay, so that story got a lot of attention.
Yes, so they put it on the front page, which was a big thing for a reporter to have your story. And we call it an anchor, where you put at the bottom of the page, right? So, yeah, so I did a lot of stories. So this is something that kind of comes to my mind.
Okay, and then you mentioned about the difference between writing and editing.
Oh yes, you wanted to know about editing. Yeah, so
Yeah,
editing really I think is a skill which I tell my team all the time. Editing your own copy is also, by the way, very hard. It's even harder than somebody else's copy because we get so attached to our words, right?
enamored with what we were written.
Oh,
Yeah,
I have labored over this. Every word is precious.
yeah,
that is another skill they teach you in journalism. Do not get attached to your words.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and you do not write to impress, you write to express whatever you have to do. So yeah, so editing, one of the things that I would say is, when you write a copy, your own copy, or even if it's somebody's, at the very first instance, a lot of things, especially if it's your own copy, it won't come to you. Give it a rest, come back to it the next day. You will see a lot of places where you can tighten copy.
yeah,
So getting somebody's style is it's, I don't know if I really have tips, but it is essentially you would try and keep your changes to the minimum. You would want to, of course, do all your grammatical changes. Definitely try and keep words. Some words maybe. Something else may be a better way to express. Maybe you suggest it to the person. And today, in fact, from the time we started to now, editing has also changed a lot, because now you want shorter, crisper sentences, shorter paragraphs, and not a style that would work maybe 20 years ago.
right. There's also this thing of structure and flow, isn't it? Because
Yes,
sometimes
very
when
much.
people write, they have a structure, but there could be things that appear, let's say, three paragraphs later, which when you move up tends to read much better.
Of course, yeah. So when you're editing, so in fact, one of the best compliments that I got once was someone who said, "You made me sound better." So it's like, okay, I did
Yeah,
something good there.
yeah,
but
yeah,
uh, but I have generally seen, even well-known writers, if you have edited their copy, if you have kept their thoughts in mind, but
yeah.
you have improved their copy, they're only too happy.
Yes.
um,
And in most cases, as far as they're concerned, if you manage to stay within the words that they use, sometimes a particular
yes,
word is not part of their flow, and
yes,
which
yes.
I think is more instinctive rather than very learned.
Yes,
Yeah.
now that you say that, I do remember. I don't know what it was, whether it was an editing assignment or a writing assignment. The
Okay.
person came back to me and said, I wouldn't use that word. It's not something anybody who knows will know that I have written, or
Yeah, it's strange how we have these little quirks which show up in our writing and the way we talk to people.
Yes.
The terms we are happy to use and the terms that we don't want to use.
Yeah.
All of these
Also,
almost become like walls that we write around the
yeah.
way we
So,
express things.
but also what happens is, sometimes, I mean, we do that a lot, and especially business writing, which is what I do now. We tend to use, reuse, overuse, really misuse a lot of words. So
Yeah,
I have told my team, that try and stay away from certain words. Only if you have just no choice are you going to use. Actually, there is always a choice. There's always a choice, but
yeah,
we are lazy,
that's what you. And I found that this is another thing that helps to get your writing tighter. That you read it several times before you even attempt changes, because then you're almost getting into the mind of the writer.
Hmm.
And then you're kind of, if you go in and then make changes about words that you think are not right, they don't fit in the right place at that point in time, it could at some later stage sound as if it doesn't belong there. But if you were to get the flow, then I think when you make changes, even if you were to add a sentence or two, it would just go along with the rest of the thing. Because it's almost like you're getting into the character of the writer. It's not
Yeah.
like, yeah,
So, one actually a really big editing assignment which I did recently.
huh,
There are these three very senior executives at a large IT company, technology company. So they approached me that they are writing a book on digital finance,
okay,
and they and says, we are finance folks. Writing is not our skill, so we have put everything there. All that, everything that needs to be there is there. And we've also done some reviews with somebody, and then they have told us that we need to bring in a little more storytelling in our writing. So can you do that for us? it
okay,
was it was daunting, because first of all, that subject is not something I mean, I have done a lot of writing around F&A of transformation, etc. But this is coming from SMEs, people who are really knowledgeable, and editing a book is not something I've done before. But I
okay,
said, okay, I will take it. And I was upfront with them. It is not something I have done. So long as you are okay with a bit of back and forth in the beginning, I'll be happy to take it up.
okay,
So there, we knew I needed to do a lot of rewriting.
okay.
There were a few instances where they came back and says, "This is not something we would say," or you have kept the paragraphs too short. And I realized that, because I come from a very different journalist background, where you want said,
Yeah,
yeah, they're right. Books
yeah,
don't read like this.
yeah.
So yeah, but then I think one or two calls, I was able to understand. Very important to understand what the
Very
writer
true.
has in mind, and what the intended reader would want. Equally
Yes,
important, right?
yes.
So there are a few feedback which I gave them, and they appreciated that yes, we didn't think of what the reader would that the reader would also want to know this.
Yeah,
So.
very true. In fact, the thing that I use on my LinkedIn as well is to say that I interpret brands, because
Mm,
it's not just communicate, because every product category has its own set of people who are
mhm.
interested, and the brand has its own voice. So how do you create those languages? And the language need not necessarily be one with words. It can be pictures, it can be film, it can be so many things that you put into it, which evolves over time. It's not something that you can just put down in a few sentences and then say, okay, this is it. And this is a
Yes.
language that people learn. So Coke has a language, Levi's has a language, and that evolves over time, because customers then understand exactly what the brand is trying to say, because they've interacted with it, and to a certain extent that brings a proximity to what the brand is about. Okay, that's a deviation, but I thought it was
No,
right
no,
in
it's
the
very
context
interesting.
of
Yeah, visual communication, though I am not an expert at all in that, but it's a fascinating field.
yeah. And then, you know, you currently do content. You know that when there was journalism and there was copy, and content was this catch-all word which really didn't make too much sense, because it was something that it's almost as if I need to categorize an entire sector of things. So let me just, and I don't know how to put it, because it's not easy to figure out a word. And for some reason, because it was easily understood, and this is what I find about words, that catch-all words are far more common, because you don't have to explain them, but when you ask people to explain it, they have no answers. So one of the favorite things I had about 5 years or 8 years ago when a copywriter came and I just said, "Give me the difference between copy and content." So they would blink. And then they say, no, one is in this kind of medium and the other is in the other kind of medium. So I'd put them out of their misery by saying, my interpretation is that content informs, copy tries to persuade. The intent is different.
Beautiful.
So, otherwise, what happens is you just get this catch all phrase. So, if you learn to express or understand what you do, then I think you communicate a lot better with whatever you're trying to say. So, uh, back to 2006, you when was the transition from journalism to content?
Yeah, 2006. And like you said, at the time, I don't know if many people use the word content writing. And all I need, see, at the time, my girls were young and I had had enough of Times of India. 12 years was a long enough time. I didn't see, and we had moved to Bangalore by then. I couldn't have got into political journalism there. I didn't know the language. IT, I had no knowledge of. So I was in Bangalore Times, and at the time, Bangalore Times was a little different avatar as it is today. It wasn't all entertainment. It was a lot about writing stories about, about the city. I did a lot of stories on corporate, as in, I had a column called Alter Ego, where I interviewed a lot of business leaders who had either a passion, a hobby, an interest. Like there was a CEO who um, uh, was a disc jockey on
Okay.
weekends. So
Okay.
it was very interesting. So yeah, so I said, okay, this is my time to look for something else. And it did take, I may have spoken about that for like maybe 2 years. My friends were all tired of it. Says, okay, you just need to do it now. So I left knowing that I would definitely do something. Initially, let me see what comes my way. And, this network that I had built in the business world, and being Bangalore, of course, it was mostly technology industry, that helped. So before I could even imagine, maybe within 6 months or 8 months, I had a steady flow of work coming. But
Okay.
in those days, there was no concept of, say, uh, writing for marketing copy or writing thought leadership. That is another big thing nowadays, thought leadership content. Nobody
Yeah.
had heard of that. But I'm really fortunate, because it was Bangalore, because I had some context in that industry, how I know my network. That is how I got into content writing.
And what were the early assignments about? What were you
Well,
doing?
the very first one, I did it for for Cisco. They wanted someone from the media to come and give like a presentation on how do you perceive the organization. What are certain things that comes from us coming from a journalism background? What do some things work and some don't? Yeah, so that was my very first assignment, I think. After that, very quickly, I started doing articles, I would say. Yeah, so in those days, it wasn't that. Uh, it like a couple of my clients in the beginning, who I still work for, in fact. So as in my agency works for that client. They started one of the very first article. In fact, that reminds me. Yeah, one of the very first article that they asked me to do was on something they kept saying, how jargons are in corporate. And now I'm quite familiar and I'm not embarrassed to ask. At that time, I had just started, and I would look like a fool if I had to ask. So I didn't ask. So the entire one, maybe 45-minute conversation, which was recorded, was on P2P. Like, what is P2P?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
had no idea what was P2P. It's this
Yeah.
entire conversation happened, and then by the end of it, I said, "Please send a recording." And later I realized it is
Yes.
purchase
Yes.
to,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
purchase to be.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the IT definition, right? Okay. Because all of these have just become part of, B2C, B2B.
yeah. There is no
B2,
end, and it goes
there's no
on.
end to this, yeah. We've, what do you say, changed expressions to, instead of saying laugh out loud, you say lol, which is okay. And this is the abbreviation generation, and they have their emojis and their memes and
But it's
everything
not
else that
just
they want to
them,
communicate.
Venu. It's not
Pardon me?
just them. I'm saying it's
Yeah, I
not
know.
just them.
Yeah, there are a whole lot of people now using it. So, do you think that this has led to a state where the number of people who read has dropped, but the number of people who write well or are able to express exactly what they mean? I find it strange at times that there are clients I've worked with who are not able to give you feedback. They're not able to tell you exactly what is wrong. They tell you something is right, or I don't like it, or I like it, which is really about you can't work from there. And I think I was fortunate because early on in the advertising career, I worked with a person called Arijit Ghosh, and he had this wonderful way of explaining. When I went back to him with lines, he'd take a long time to brief. When I went back to him with a line or set of lines, he'd tell me which line worked and why it wouldn't work, which clarified things to such an extent that that has become my go-to way of dealing with people. So it's never about saying that no, this I don't like it or I like it. It's about saying I think this is what the job is doing, this is what the line is doing, this is what the entire piece is doing, and this is where I think it is not covering what it's supposed to do. And that seems to get at least a set of self-driven people to investigate and go a little further. If somebody is just churning out content, it's a very different thing. But I think people who get a sense of what this is about will definitely, benefit from this. So, what is your method of, differentiating corporate content when you sit down to write? What is the difference that you find from what you did in journalism versus what you do in business? You did mention that you try and stay away from certain words, but otherwise, do you think what is your way of working?
See, there are some, of course, things which haven't changed. Some are
Okay,
fundamentals, whether you write for a newspaper or you write for a company's blog, those things would remain the same. You cannot forget who you're writing for example, right? Um, like a small example, we had this new client. We were writing blogs for them and blog posts for their own company blog, and we applied the same method as we would do for other clients.
right.
And they came back and says, you know what, our audience is a bit more informed than what maybe you're used to.
Okay,
So what the depth that we need is more. We need a little more of industry flavor, which we were going by what we have seen in the previous articles plus what we were doing. So sometimes what you say, it is good if you have a client who can express well, can go beyond I don't like it.
yep,
Thankfully, the people that I have worked for as an agency, mm, if not everybody, at least the main person who would interact with us would know a little more than I don't like
yeah,
it. So that helps. Uh, in terms of method, I think, our clients expect us to be not just a writing partner. A lot of them call you a partner, whether they mean it or not, but they want you to be the thinking partner.
okay,
So I think it's very important for me, as as from my agency, and for everybody who wants to make a career out of content writing, should know that I am here, my job here is to not just transcribe what somebody has given me. First of all, the briefs are not going to be extensive. Very
Yeah.
often, hardly be called a brief, you know. So it is for you to kind of think through it, said, okay, maybe this is what they want, right? You know how it is. The briefs
Yeah.
are not anything, but it's fine. It's their job is something else. My client is there running a business, or maybe whatever, has other marketing goals to achieve, and that is why we come in. That is the reason they see us as the experts. So they tell us, our this is the theme, so can you come up with some topics for that, and then go from there. Sometimes you have an SME interview, sometimes you don't. So I would say for us, if I mean, I can't give a number, but say for a five, I'm just randomly. So 500 word, if you have to write, I would probably read 4 hours or maybe 5 hours to understand the subject.
Right.
And another thing which I wanted to bring out is, as a content writer, most of us are generalists.
Yeah.
I have come from philosophy background, and I'm writing on artificial intelligence, which is being read by the experts.
Yeah.
Like this client of ours I told you about, right? So they said our readers are a little more informed than this. So you need to get deeper into the subject. So you really have to understand that you are there as your client's thinking partner. You need to, first of all, of course, simplify, make it understandable, break down big, large concepts, cons- complex subjects have to be explained well. All of that is, of course, important. But you really, it's something I tell the team all the time, that you will get two and two, and you have to make it five.
Right.
A little bit of creative thinking to connect the dots to tell a story.
So we'll get into this area of which is, I think, one of the problems we all face today, that people with barely any experience, um, write stuff about how you should write content.
Mhm.
It's as if they prefer to write to advise rather than actually show off their writing skills. I wonder why this has become such a trend, because if you didn't know enough about a subject earlier, you would be very wary about putting your ignorance out there. And yet, copy paste wisdom has now become the norm. People are just telling you, okay, they borrowed something from somewhere. They only have the intelligence to figure out that this is something important. And then they just pass it off as their own, as if they have understood this and they're doing it. So, what's your take on it?
Venu, I think what maybe we will touch upon it later in this discussion, what AI is doing, in a way, it is helping remove, a lot of these copy paste kind of work. um, you get that those type of roles, those type of jobs are going or have already gone. There are companies who do blog, who maintain a blog just for the purpose of SEO. You read two or three of the same topic, you can't differentiate one from another. You can't. Not one is telling something original, right?
Yeah.
And all of that is being done by people who are just focused on getting Google ranking, and they're stuffing it with keywords. So to answer your question, I'm not saying all of AI is good, definitely not. We need to be wary of it, all of us. But at the first level, I think it is just culling that kind of roles, people who are doing that.
And they're also going to find that if you don't express a thought in a style which is different,
Mm.
there is this lowest common denominator, the LCM of AI, where when you ask it to regenerate stuff, it's almost as if it's just repackaged the content in a way that makes it different, but not really different. Whereas when people write, there is a fundamental style which I think is hard to replicate, because that comes from a a very different source. It is
Of
not
course.
manufactured. And I don't think that will go away anytime soon, because when people read your connection to a person, I think this happens even in special effects. They worry about how you have to make it so realistic, otherwise, people make out it's fake instantly. And as we keep doing this, I think even the writing, it's like the problem with stock photography that we have today. It's all looking the same. Whereas earlier, you used to go for an assignment, you get the photographer, you get the situation, and though the situations are more or less the same, it's like the characters. The stories are the same, but how you tell them is always going to be different. And I think that's where the strength of writing really comes in, which I mean, I'm preaching to the converted, because you've been doing this all your life, and you know
Yeah.
exactly where this comes from.
No, no, I mean, you're from a very related industry, allied industry, right? So we are allies in this also.
Yeah,
So yes, we as writers, as creators of copy, video, photographs, we know that our job has become harder. So we all have to be extremely conscious that this job can be done by anybody. In fact, compared to your work, our work, which is again something I tell my team all the time, anybody can string two sentences together,
yeah,
right? Not anybody can make a video. Now they can, but there was a time they couldn't,
yeah,
right? So I tell them always that why are they coming to us? Because we have to give them something more than just some words which are strung together, right? So that is where knowledge base is important, and we are all generalists. Most content writers are generalists, but you have to bypass that. You have to get deeper into the subject, and that will happen by just, for us, for me particularly, it has been just on the job. I have I mean, I don't want to say you need to do a lot of courses. I'm sure all that helps. I should have myself probably done that. But you can also learn on the job by just sheer spending hours and hours reading and understanding the subject. So yes, our jobs as creators of copy, of videos, whatever, is much tougher today, because you have to really, really prove yourself. You have to get even sharper insights, and not everybody has the luxury of, say, your number of years of experience or my number of years of experience. When you're getting into the field, their jobs even harder, because they don't have the luxury of years of experience to speak.
yeah. And maybe that's why they've been told that at least maintain the facade of expertise. Otherwise, nobody will give you that first job. There is this catch 22 situation about I won't get a job unless I have the experience. And how do I get the experience unless I have the job? But to me, the easiest way through that is to develop a culture of writing and expressing yourself early on. People think that I don't need to learn to write, but you need to learn to express yourself. And if it's with words, writing is one of the best ways to do it. Speaking, you will do, because if you're one of those outgoing people, you will make friends, all of that. But if your writing has to speak, then you have to make the effort, because it's not as if you have a thought and when that is translated into words, it'll flow. It's not as if whatever is in your head will just appear on paper magically. It doesn't. And you and I, as writers, know that, because you struggle. You know it's there in your head, but when it has to come down as that perfect sentence, it's always that effort where you have to keep refining it and then figure out, okay, what part of it is working. But when you spoke about working for an AI company, I'm intrigued about, without giving away stuff, what is it that they are looking at? What do they want to communicate?
Oh, are you asking about AI as, no, one is writing for technology companies on AI as a subject
Right,
knowledge area.
right,
But are you asking about writing for an AI company in terms of prompt writing? Because that's another big area which is coming up.
right.
You're asking about the latter.
I'm asking about both because I see prompts.
Okay.
Again, prompts are very, very difficult to come up with because if you have to generate something that the machine has to develop into something unique, the input has to be unique, which
Yes.
is where I assume the prompt is really working.
Yeah, so prompt writing, I wouldn't say I have a lot of knowledge about that. I have tried out because there, and especially here in California, I've been looking out just to see what kind of jobs there are, what kind of writers' roles are coming up. There is a lot happening in prompt writing, and I have done a few. So it is. Also scary because we think story what you said, right? You and I will tell a story that AI cannot. Maybe that's not true. That's not going to be true in maybe 5 years or maybe even sooner than that,
Okay.
because some of the assignments are about creative writing, and I don't know how that gets fed, how the algorithm will create something unique each time. But they are like, how do you compare like two different movies and give an analysis of that, or a completely random certain words have been brought together. Like there is this example, I will give it because it's on the internet, so there's no problem about talking about it. So there was one prompt writing assignment. I thought, let me just try out one assignment and see how it goes. So the creative writing question was, if you were write a short story um, about a green dancing octopus with a PhD in English literature, and the story is set in Sam Friedman's FTX office.
Okay.
And Venu, the funniest thing is, one, I was stumped. I said, wow, I'm not a creative writer, but I'm going to give it a go. But
Okay.
I wanted to just know where is his office located. So at least I get some context, right? So I
Okay.
just did a search, uh, FTX office, Sam Friedman, and guess what comes up? This entire prompt, because
Wow.
somebody has done this and has put it on the internet for others to see what answers there could be. So even when you're writing prompts, so this is something they tell you, that do not use other generative AI sites to create an answer, because people are probably doing it because those answers
Yes.
are all there.
And, and okay, maybe this is not the place for a more detailed discussion on this, but I have my views on where I think AI will grow and where I think it will not. For example, anything that is repetitive, which needs to be done over and over again, where you're explaining something to people and you do a great job of user manuals, for example, where you simply have to give instructions. There's a form
Yeah,
of writing. But if you have to figure out how you're exploring in your mind based on your influences from childhood to where you are today, if you were to actually document that and write it in a particular way, that style and flavor will be different. We're still discovering new writers every year who manage to come up with stuff which is very different from what AI can come up with.
of course.
So, I mean, which is why
No,
I
no, of
said this may
course.
not be the.
I completely agree with you, and it is my hope and wish that you and I are right.
No, and I don't have any worries about, okay, because, it's like work for 30, 35 years. We've done our writing, we've done our, all the things that have gone on so far. So we started off when you said, will I have enough to talk about? And we are nearing the end of the show now.
I didn't realize that at all. Okay, there is one thing I want to add here, Venu, if I can, one short story, one
Yeah.
anecdote. So when I was in Miranda House, our English department invited Khushwant Singh for a talk,
Okay.
and there's something he said which stayed with me. And so someone was asking about writer's block. He said, what is writer's block? Take a piece of paper. You don't need any prompting. A blank piece of paper is your biggest. He may not have used the word prompt,
Yeah.
but that is your biggest motivation, a blank sheet of paper. So it's like, I wonder what Kushwant Singh would have done said now,
Yeah.
because I know what writers do as the first draft, to create a first draft, to get your ideas going. They post questions on ChatGPT or whatever generative AI sites to get
Yeah.
get their flow of thought going.
Right.
Yeah.
And ultimately, for me, writing is therapeutic. I love doing it every day. So I guess if you get into that space, but again, it's like for some people, reading is something that they just love doing. So I think you've got to find out what really gets you interested and keeping on going. So, what would your advice be in conclusion, Anjali, about how people should approach content writing and what they should? So, if you can sum this up in about a minute.
Okay. So if you want to make a career in content writing, one of the things you should be very conscious of is how can I become a specialist in a subject from being a generalist? Most of us start as generalists. So pick a niche, extremely important to pick a niche. Second is to see that you offer some analytical thoughts, because it's like I said earlier, how do you put two and two together and make it five? How do you join the dots? Tell the clients, give something which goes beyond what you've been asked for. Of course, writing is definitely a given. There is no two thoughts about it. And listen, very important to listen and never stop learning. There is just no one day should go without you learning about what's going on around the world. I think very, very important. Goes for any career, I would say, but
Wonderful.
here too.
Thank you, Panchali. It's been a pleasure. And thank you so much for taking the time. It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you, Venu. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Great. Panchali has spoken about her experience and what she has managed in a career in content writing. And anyone who's entering the field today has AI for competition, but that should not deter you. Next week, another guest, another experience, and please do join us for My First Job, the podcast.